All right, let's jump into our 3-pack. I want to talk about this. We haven't talked about this, I don't think, in years. But this concept of storifying your pitch. I'm still.
Oh, good point.
I'm at the point now when I actually type in the word storifying, I don't get that red line underneath because I feel like I invented the word, and it took Microsoft Word a few years to catch on. But
Yeah.
I've used it enough. So
I know Wikipedia's got you down, but I don't think Webster does.
I need to write a Wikipedia page for Nick.
Please don't.
Weedy Camp on Wikipedia.
No, crickets.
We can have
Okay,
some
back to
fun
the
with
news.
that, anyways. But the whole idea of storifying your pitch, and I think sometimes we just become, really, really intent in our presentations when we're having a real estate conversation with somebody new, or it doesn't even have to be somebody new, but we kind of get into the conversation of real estate. And I think we sometimes automatically go into a sales mode, trying to close the deal rather than having a dialogue and building a relationship. But, I always think about storifying your pitch, and, we train our team, especially on new encounters. There's a gazillion of us here in Arizona that've got real estate licenses. So there are definitely different strategies in different ways to differentiate yourself and stand out. And I think bringing stories into the pitch is one of them. And I wanted to just start off by just saying, everybody loves a good story.
Yep.
Stories are powerful. People relate to stories. People want to hear stories. It's, for those of us that go to church, there's a reason why the sermon always includes stories, because they're engaging and it creates interest. And there's reasons why we tell our kids stories. There's reasons why when we were kids our parents told us stories. So I think stories are very, very important. And just understand that everybody loves a good story. It's why we go to movies, which, by the way, I saw The Beekeeper on Saturday night. That's a game changer. This is like John Wick and The Equalizer coming together. I just throw that out there. You are welcome.
I saw the attractions. I'll look at it. Hey, so here's the thing, Mike. You're right. I can actually think back maybe to very, very close to our first introduction, you and I, back in maybe 1999 era.
When I stole the hot tub?
Before that. And so in that particular situation, you were then saying, the way to get someone to more deeply understand how what I'm about to say can affect them or connect with them or get them to listen maybe a little longer than they would have had I not engaged them. You are always telling people to tell a story. Find a client who you've just done business with. It could be your very first client. You could use that relationship forever in all your future pitches. Or it could be a story from some other agent's issue that now you've been able to capture. But the end result comes down really to this. You have to be careful when you're telling a story not to talk too long.
Yeah.
Make the story succinct. I would like to recommend this. I used to say go to Toastmasters. I'm no longer going to do that. I'm going to say go to YouTube and look at TEDx. And the reason is, in 15 minutes, they can tell you a thesis. they can explain how they accomplish their data, and they can, in many instances, get you to expand the context of what you were thinking before you started listening to that TEDx. That's the goal when we're having conversations with a consumer, is not just to talk.
Well, as much as I do love you and I respect you, I still think Toastmasters is a great thing.
I didn't
because you do need that experience to get in front of people and overcome the nerves. But I totally
apologize.
I totally get the point.
No,
I totally get the point.
Yeah, I think that telling a good story allows perspective, context, and relatability. But you have to be careful. You could be also telling a bad story. So you have to know the demographic of who you're speaking to. Talking to a 30-year-old first-time home buyer about how interest rates used to be 17, 18%. Newsflash, they don't care. They care what impacts them. So just be careful when you're having these conversations. I think Simon Sinek, to kind of go off what Todd was saying on the TEDx thing, watch Simon Sinek's YouTube delivery. His conversations are very high level. He talks about dopamine spikes and chemistry in your brain, but he does it with storytelling, and it really resonates with a lot of people, and that's why he gets so many shares over and over again with what he's talking about.
Yeah, or listen to Emilio Justo, the new one that just came out, which is what was it? The actual term, Nick, on that one? It was delayed gratification.
Yeah,
That's what it was. Yeah, pretty cool.
All right. So with that being said, include stories in your pitch, whether you are dealing with somebody at an open house, whether you're having a first time real estate conversation with someone, whether you're going back through your sphere of influence or going back to a past story. Include stories in your pitch. Stories make your pitch more interesting and engaging. As much as the numbers, Todd, that you provide each and every week, and they're powerful and they help us, if that's all we include in a conversation with someone, we're going to lose them. So when you add stories, your pitch becomes more interesting, and it adds credibility to your abilities. When I tell a story of how I have helped someone overcome this issue, or I help someone in this specific real estate scenario, the recipient of that story is now going, okay, Mike now has experience, because the stories show how we have experience. Mike, I can picture Mike actually getting us through this transaction, and oh, I can see how Mike used his abilities. And when you are the only agent that is telling the story, the other agents who are pitching that client aren't experiencing those same things of being able to imagine their agent overcoming those obstacles and those situations. So as I am, as I am preparing and going through my pitch with someone, we always talk about the 70-30 rule or the 80-20 rule. If you're doing all the talking, you will never identify what the problem is, what the objectives are, because you just can't throw out, to Nick's point, just can't throw out a story for the sake of throwing out a story. The story has always got to relate to their specific situation, whether they are a first-time home buyer, a second-time home buyer, whether they're going through a divorce, whether they're military, whether they're an educator, whatever that situation is. I have to find that story that is going to be most appropriate based on the needs of the receiver.
I'm so happy you said that. And, because realistically, that's the key. The key is, why are you telling the story? And what are you hoping to achieve by telling the story? How are you trying to reposition or reframe the consumer's mind to get away from maybe a previous belief? How are you helping them identify to be willing to make that change all by themselves? And I think those are a lot of the things. So I liked where you just the last couple of sentences, Mike, because that's what I was thinking when you started with this, was just continue to be the agent who asks questions, because through so many questions, you're going to identify, which is Mike's last point on number 2, you're going to be able to identify what situation they're in and what your objective is on the fly. When you do that, you then have to have a story to be able to tell, to overcome and connect the dots.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, storifying your pitch is very important, but I want to make sure we're super clear. You're not going to walk into a group of people and say, I'm a good realtor, let me tell you a story about why I'm a good realtor. You're asking questions.
No, you wouldn't.
You're asking questions. You're having a conversation, and that conversation leads to your ability to explain you went through this scenario with this client or this transaction, and tell the story about how you were successful. Having a conversation, say, yeah, I'm really good, I got 5 years in the business. Okay, well, I've got 5 years in the business negotiating and navigating through multiple transactions. We had a transaction last year that I had to do this, this, and this. You're not bragging, you're telling a conversation, you're engaging with somebody else. So you're talking back and forth. And the pitch part of it is just, it's telling people why you're their person. It's practicing your elevator pitch. It's practicing having conversations about why people should work with you, but you include stories on that. When we talk to realtors every day about why coming to West USA or what it can do for their business, we have a few individuals that have a couple of stories that really hits home, but it's not, they can't just start with that story. They've got to get to that place in the conversation that the person's ready to hear it.
And it's
Like a
why
setup.
Yeah.
it's why we focus on testimonials. It's why agents focus on getting Zillow reviews
Yeah.
and reviews everywhere, because those reviews, as brief as they are, they tell the story to
Exactly.
other people who are reading those reviews, and again, it lends that credibility.
Yep.
All right, number 3, then where do you get stories? So I know a lot of agents, when we talk about this, well, I'm new to the industry. I haven't sold any houses, or I've only sold one house. Well, obviously, you want to relate to stories from your personal experience, especially if you are experienced in real estate. But even if not, it doesn't matter. That's what I tell our team. When we're talking about home ownership, when we're talking about building wealth in real estate, if you own a home, that's a story.
Absolutely.
How you got there and how you overcame whatever obstacles. But obviously, the more experienced you are, the more stories that you have at your disposal that I'm able to now, take when I'm talking with a first-time home buyer. I've got that story when I'm talking with somebody at Luke Air Force Base, whether they're coming in, coming out. I've got so many stories that I can include when I'm talking to investors, talking to people who are buying multifamily. I've just been doing this long enough where I've got enough stories in my arsenal. However, though, not everybody does. So lean on those of you that are smart enough to have hired a West USA coach or joined a team. It's okay to rely on other people's stories. You just can't put yourself in the position as you're the agent that led said buyer or said seller down the road. But that's what we always tell our team. Every Wednesday morning at our team meetings, we do our wins, where agents on our team share kind of what their successes were. But part of the reason that we do that is so that the other agents on our team can listen to the other stories and be able to say, hey, our team helped such and such. Here's a story from our team, or here's a story from another agent that I work with, or here's a story that we experienced at West USA. So, as you get to know other agents, whether at office meetings, happy hour events, whatever the case is, glean from their stories as well. It's just important. I don't think there's any intellectual property rights there. But if you weren't the actual agent that did it, you just got to be careful. You got to be careful on how you present it. You don't want to present it as you were the agent of record there. But it's okay to tell the story from what other agents have done and how we have collectively achieved XYZ goal.
So, people are always trying to have a better, more woe is me story than sometimes the next person. So sometimes you're hearing in a room, you're listening to people and they're talking about, oh yeah, during my inspection period, this happened and blah, 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 blah. And then you can think about, or maybe they're saying, so here's how I overcame it. But maybe you're saying, oh my gosh, what can I be doing not to put somebody in that same scenario? And then when that topic comes up again, when you're having a conversation with the consumer, you can tell them a story because you just heard one. And so even a complaint, even a point of interest or just a person's personal feelings about a particular topic, and then digging down a little bit more. Why did you feel that way? Getting them to come out with it more can bring to the surface those things that then you have to have the story to prepare to have that conversation.
Yeah, and typically Nick's not the storyteller; he's part of the story.
Generally, yes. I'm not as entertaining as Mikey is, but he usually takes a lot of my experiences and uses them for his own. Did I tell you guys when I stole a hot tub, my first real estate transaction? So, I mean, a couple of things from that. You never want to tell fibs. You don't want to ever inject yourself into a conversation that you didn't do, but you're supposed to be the expert in real estate. You should know everything that's happening in your industry. So you're going to be reading articles and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos, having conversations with experts in the office meetings and listening to your brokers, listening to this podcast. Take that information and use it in your day-to-day. I do more than just real estate. I like to run out in the desert. I read a lot about trail running. I'm not the ultimate ultra marathon trail runner, but I read a lot about it, so I can have a conversation about it. I didn't do a lot of the crazy stuff that people I follow do, but I can say, hey, this guy Mike, he ran, well, not you, Mike, somebody else ran 255 miles. We can tell those stories.
Not even in my lifetime.
No, you can do that and just not be the person that was engaged in the actual scenario. It's a story. It's a conversation. Again, you're just moving through a back and forth with a human being, and it's okay to do that by telling things that you heard or oversaw.
All right, so just try it next time you're
Yeah.
delivering your pitch. Next time you're having a discussion with someone in regards to real estate, throw in a story. And again, I want to emphasize it's also based on your personal experience as well. I find that those are the most important. When I'm talking to would-be investors or investors, there's always that added element that I can bring to the table because I'm an investor myself and I can tell my personal stories, but they're very powerful. Leverage them, try them, and so forth.